Hello to all CineMaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. Film Alien Raiders begins in a quiet town called Bucklick, where we meet a young man named Benny who works at the town's supermarket, Stinger's Market. Benny is outside organizing shopping carts, but then he goes back into the store and asks his manager, Tarky, for some alcohol to clean his hands. Tarky tells him to go to the cashier, where he finds Lisa paying for some items for her husband, police officer Steve. Everything seems to indicate it's a quiet night, until we see a group in a van filming and preparing to storm the market. After a while, a man enters and locks the market doors at the same time the manager announces the store is closed. Benny is walking through the aisles until he meets police officer Hudson, who asks him for the location of something, and Benny directs him where to find it. Benny fiddles with the shelf a bit and continues on until he finds one of his colleagues dead, and suddenly he is surprised by two armed men. The second armed man is holding another colleague hostage. The armed woman orders Benny to lie on the ground, and the camera cuts back to the other kidnappers, one of whom is filming everything. The man with the camera notices that Tarky is trying to call the police, so he quickly stops and threatens him. But it seems the criminals don't want to steal anything. One of them starts inspecting the customers as if searching for something, going from person to person examining them. The man who appears to be their leader is named Ritter, and he orders the rest of the group to separate the hostages, putting each one in a different aisle under surveillance. One of them warns the others to be careful and lets them know they are aware of their presence. The man inspecting people is named Spooky, and when he inspects a woman, it's clear she's not what they're looking for. The woman tries to escape, so Spooky alerts his colleague, who immediately kills her, or whatever happened to her at that moment. The man watching Officer Hudson gets distracted for a moment, and Hudson takes advantage of the opportunity and kills him. Hudson wastes no time and quickly calls for backup. The men try to contact their friend but get no response, so Hudson heads to their location, and there is an exchange of gunfire, but afterwards he decides to retreat and hides among the aisles. While the man with the camera is watching the rest of the hostages, Ritter and Kane go after Hudson, and eventually they find their dead friend's body. As Hudson is walking through the aisles, he encounters Spooky, and without thinking twice, shoots him. Hudson assesses the situation calmly, while Ritter and Kane hear the gunshots. Ritter quickly reaches the aisle and Hudson tells him not to move, but the man keeps walking until Kane arrives from behind and kills Hudson. Kane finds the officer's phone and sees he managed to call for backup, so he quickly informs the rest of the group. Ritter tries to help Spooky, but he doesn't survive his injuries and dies afterwards. Kane and Logan arrive with the hostages. Kane says they need to leave immediately, but Ritter insists they stay because he doesn't want to give up and leave what they're looking for, and he asks for more time. Kane agrees. Ritter informs Sterling that the police are coming and asks if she's still in on the plan. She confirms and agrees to continue with them. Ritter then says that before Spooky died, he said the thing they're looking for is here. Kane takes the hostages away, while Ritter takes some of Spooky's blood to leave a warning sign at the store entrance, writing "No one come near." Shortly after, the police arrive and release some of the hostages who have already been inspected. At this time, Ritter asks Kane to detain those who haven't been inspected yet, and we see Sterling inspecting the body of the woman Spooky pointed out, saying that the sample is developing and is in the 8th month of pregnancy. Ritter joins the rest of the group and says that the police are busy interrogating the hostages, then says they need to use Plan B. Outside, the police are interrogating one of the hostages. Officer Steve arrives at the scene and says his wife's daughter is inside, insisting they need to act quickly. Inside the market, the group seems divided over Ritter's decision to continue the mission. Kane asks how they'll execute Plan B without a new person to identify the target, and Ritter replies that they'll need to find someone else, but Sterling reminds them that the police won't let anyone in. Ritter suggests that Charlotte take on the role, but Kane laughs and asks if he forgot what happened to Scott. The group then decides to run some tests on the people as the police arrive. Sterling warns that this is dangerous, but Ritter replies that Spooky confirmed it's safe. Sterling tries to convince him that there are young people among the hostages, but Ritter seems worried and says that this thing can't leave here. Sterling agrees and asks them to bring the necessary equipment. Kane doesn't like the idea, so Logan volunteers to go get it so the people inside won't be able to determine the police's locations. Inside the market, Logan moves Spooky's body to the cold room where the rest of the bodies are. When he leaves, we see the dead officer's body start to twitch and the lights flicker. Afterwards, they begin the first test, making the hostages drink a liter of milk, but one of the women can't do it. Kane loses his patience and yells at her to finish, warning the manager that he'll be the first to be tested. When Kane leaves the room, Lisa says that in the room with the dead bodies they forgot the officer's gun and they could use it to try to get out alive. One of the men tells her she's stupid for wanting to do that, but she explains her reasons, saying her stepfather is a police negotiator, and she's heard many reports about situations like this, insisting that these men didn't even consider any negotiation. Outside, Steve and Officer Cooper inspect the van used by the suspects. Both approach cautiously, and Steve decides to open the back doors, finding a large quantity of high-caliber ammunition, organized weapons, and many cassette tapes, all with the image of an unknown man's face. This discovery confirms that this group is not just kidnappers, but involved in something bigger and premeditated. Cooper then informs the negotiator that the van is registered to Aaron Ritter, a 43-year-old widower with a clean record who worked for many years at JP. Steve, surprised, asks what JPL is, and Cooper replies that it's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a very advanced research unit related to space exploration. The mention of JPL raises more suspicions about the kidnappers and their intentions. Steve quickly asks to contact Ritter by phone, but Cooper informs him that all cell phone networks are blocked, so Steve orders them to find an alternative way to communicate to try to negotiate before something worse happens. Inside the market, the group returns to the hostage's room, and Ritter decides to formally introduce his team: Sterling, a doctor and biology specialist; Logan, responsible for recordings and equipment; and Kane, whose role isn't specified but he seems to be the one who carries out the task. The difficult one. One of the older hostages in a desperate tone begs them to release the younger people, but Ritter refuses and says that unfortunately, everyone here is in danger and no one is above suspicion. Then he begins to explain the reason for their presence in this place, and reveals that they are looking for a carrier of a very dangerous substance, something they tracked until it reached back late. Ritter reveals that the only member of the team who could identify the infected was Spooky, who was killed during the confrontation, and now they will have to resort to another, more dangerous method to find out who is infected. Manager Tarky will be the first to undergo the new test. Ritter explains that the milk they drank changes the body's internal acidity, which is supposed to cause a noticeable reaction in those who are infected, and says that anyone who shows no signs will be safely released. If someone turns out to be infected, Kane responds that this person will die. Then they take Tarky to a separate room, and Kane keeps an eye on the rest. Logan is filming the entire process, starting with Tarky's name written on the lid of a can, documenting every step. Sterling enters and reports that she has examined all the bodies in the cold room and discovered that all the corpses are of fertilized females, confirming the biological threat they are facing. Ritter confronts Tarky and asks him if he is married. The man replies that he is divorced. Then he asks him to look at his fingers and tells him if he sees a red line, which could be a sign of infection. Tarky denies it and says he doesn't see anything. After that, the team starts playing small psychological games with him to distract him while Sterling prepares to cut off the manager's finger as part of the physical test. When he sees the knife, Tarky gets scared, backs away, and corners himself against the wall in despair. In the hostage room, everyone hears the commotion, and Kane decides to go see what's happening. Tarky tries to bargain in desperation and offers them the money he stole from the safe, but the group ignores his offer and insists on continuing the test. At this time, regarding the escape plan, the old man says he will go get the gun he left in the cold room as agreed with Lisa, and the four conspirators agree to the change. Lisa gives them instructions that as soon as he opens fire and tries to start a conversation, he directly asks the kidnappers what exactly they want. But Ritter responds and says, "Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe me." Steve insists and asks Ritter to try to explain, saying that he has seen a lot in his job and might not be surprised by the answer. But Ritter refuses to cooperate and says he is too busy for this conversation. Steve then tries to touch on something personal and says that Ritter is far from home, and the man coldly replies, "I go wherever the job requires." Steve notices an emotional gap and asks if Ritter's daughter would be proud of what he is doing, which clearly shakes him for a moment, but he quickly regains control and ignores the provocation, continuing with the plan and asking the investigator to bring him Charlotte. Steve changes the subject and asks if there is anyone infected inside the market to get any information, but Ritter doesn't care about the question and just says that Charlotte is being held at a local police station. Steve insists on knowing about the hostages, but Ritter raises his voice and says, "The longer you delay, the more dangerous it gets." When Steve realizes he won't get clear answers, he agrees to continue. Inside the market, they continue with the plan, holding manager Tarky tightly, and Sterling, without hesitation, cuts off one of his fingers, causing a scream that is clearly heard from the hostage room, which makes everyone even more tense. The severed finger is placed in a jar of ice, and after 2 minutes, Sterling confirms there is no reaction, meaning he is clear. Logan looks disappointed and says he was sure Tarky was the infected one. Outside, the police are watching recordings left by Dr. Sterling in which she explains how these creatures work and how they can be destroyed. She reveals that freezing them is the best way to prevent them from reproducing, and even shows X-rays of one of them that has reached an advanced stage of development. Steve and Cooper watch attentively, and one of them asks if she really said this came from a meteorite or foreign object, raising more doubts about the source of the threat. Cooper then informs Steve that Charlotte is on her way and will arrive in Then he shows him Charlotte's criminal record, which contains minor violations, and presents Aaron Ryder's file, revealing that he was dismissed from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory after being accused of murder, although he was acquitted. Cooper adds that all other members associated with Ryder were dismissed at the same time, and according to Ryder's fever chart, the group gathered again in a strange way, as if they formed a club, bought large quantities of weapons, and disappeared for months. Back at the market, Benny warns the professor not to let the fridge door close completely and explains that it can only be opened from the outside, so if someone gets locked inside, they won't be able to get out. After a while they bring Tarky back to the hostage room, and everyone wants to know what happened to him. The manager replies that they cut off his finger, shocking the others. Kane then chooses Lisa to be next, but she panics and says her father is Detective Steve. Ryder appears and asks what the commotion is, and Kane replies that Lisa seems to have connections. Ryder wants to know if Steve is really her father, and she replies that he is actually her stepfather. But still, Ryder orders the plan to continue as usual. Before Kane takes Lisa, Benny offers to go instead, and the group agrees, taking the boy to the next phase of the test. At this time, Charlotte is on her way to the market in a police car, obviously drunk, and asks for her sunglasses. The officer is driving calmly and asks her why she and Ryder have problems, and Charlotte replies that she ruined everything. The officer, puzzled, asks what exactly she ruined, and Charlotte begins to explain that she was supposed to help Ryder with a mission but chose to continue using illegal substances and left him. Then she asks the officer to loosen her handcuffs, complaining that they are too tight, but he refuses and tells her they are almost there. To distract her, he turns on the radio, but Charlotte starts behaving strangely and becomes agitated. With unexpected strength, she manages to break the handcuffs even though her hands are bruised. Back at the market, the group begins the same process with Benny, who, scared, asks if there is a correct answer that could prevent his finger from being cut off. Ryder tells him he can't reveal that, then asks why the boy volunteered to go instead of the girl. Benny insists on knowing if there is anything he can do to prevent what is about to happen, but no one answers him. Ryder apologizes and cuts off the boy's finger. The police examine footage of people running in fear and trying to hide in their homes. In the room, Kane praises Benny's courage for a while and hears a woman scream. Sterling confirms she is not the target either. Ryder asks how many are left, and she says Sterling believes they no longer need Charlotte. Suddenly she screams a terrifying scream and attacks the group with superhuman strength, and Ryder manages to kill her. Kane tries to contact the group, but when he gets no response, he decides to go see what's going on. The hostages take advantage of the chaos to plan to get the dead officer's gun. The professor goes to the fridge, takes the gun, but before he returns to the group, he is attacked and killed. The sound of gunfire startles everyone, and Ryder tells Steve that Lisa is still alive, but they threaten that if Charlotte doesn't surrender, another person will die. Steve asks for 10 minutes, and Logan reports that the Sentinel guard was going to transfer the infection to Sterling and says that the creature was different. They notice the professor's absence, and under pressure, Ben admits that he let the creature into the fridge. Logan goes to investigate and they find the remains of the professor. Shortly after, the police officer's corpse rises, and they confront it with gunfire. Outside, Charlotte arrives, hands over the handcuffs, and surprises everyone with her ability. While Charlotte is talking to Steve, she reveals that the aliens infect humans like a virus and turn them into violent and strong hosts. Ryder finds a wounded Kane, who tells him that the virus is in the police officer and thinks he is the king. He confesses that he was infected and asks Ryder to kill him. Ryder agrees and finishes him off. Back at the market, Ryder tells Sterling that the king was the police officer. He tells her he is going to hunt the monster and asks her to watch the hostages. Steve discovers that Charlotte has been infected and can now see the aliens, which attracts the monster's attention. The hostages attack Sterling and take her weapon. Manny celebrates taking control, but the creature throws him aside. Ryder tries to shoot but fails, and the creature devours. Steve tries to go in, but Charlotte stops him. Ryder explains to Benny that if they want to survive, they must trust them. Sterling shows them that she also took the test. Ryder asks for just 10 minutes, and Steve demands Lisa's release, but Ryder suggests a swap, Charlotte for Lisa. Charlotte quickly examines Steve and confirms he is clean. Ryder explains the plan, but before he finishes, they hear noises and cut off communication. After that, Steve tells the police to prepare him to go in, and Charlotte tries to stop them but fails. Lisa still doesn't trust them, but Benny reminds her that she saw the creature, and they decide to help. The group searches the market and finds a locked door. In the dark corridors, they find Manny's corpse. Ryder warns them they will have to exit through the main entrance. Suddenly, Sterling and Tarky see a shadow. Tarky thinks they're cornered, but Ryder says the creature wants to kill him. Steve sees searchlights and is surprised by the slow movement. The group walks behind him and hears a Tarky drops the jar with his finger, and when he tries to retrieve it, he is brutally killed. Ryder sends everyone to the manager's office, then opens the entrance door and finds Steve, who demands to know where Lisa is. Ryder lies and says she's dead, but then admits she's alive and suggests a temporary alliance. Sterling reports that she shot the creature 6 times. Shortly after, the creature appears again, but flees when heavily shot. Then Lisa and Benny make a plan. He offers to distract the creature, but the girl refuses to leave him. Steve insists on taking Lisa before continuing. Ryder tells him where the office is and asks him to let him finish the job when he gets out. Steve finds the kids, and they all hug. Charlotte uses her powers to attract the king. As Steve and the kids are leaving, the police storm the place. Suddenly, the creature charges in and violently attacks Ryder. Sterling grabs her gun and Steve fires to distract the creature. Ryder takes the opportunity to stab the creature and separate it from its host. He calls for help, and all the police open fire, finally killing the monster but also hitting Ryder. Since he was infected, he quickly asks them to kill him, and Sterling grants his last wish. After a few minutes, Steve promises Sterling that if everything checks out, she will get her freedom. Charlotte warns on the radio that this wasn't the king. Sterling thinks it must be one of the kids. Then we see Benny and Lisa sitting in the police car. When Benny calls the girl, he notices she is acting strange. When he tries to get out, he finds the door locked. He points the gun at her and she tells him, "I will always love you." After that, all we hear is Benny's scream, and that's the end of the movie. See you in a new summary, and thanks for watching.